At 742, he was 33, a Sandhurst graduate with 14 years service and no confirmed kills. The Wehrmacht had already overrun Poland and was ripping through France. The British Expeditionary Force was retreating to Dunkirk. Churchill's company had lost 11 men in 3 days. Men were abandoning rifles and equipment to run faster for the coast. Churchill did not run. He carried a 6-foot English longbow, 70-pound draw, 200-yard reach in expert hands, and he was an expert. 11 months earlier, he'd represented Britain at the World Archery Championships in Oslo. When a German sergeant came into view at 30 yards, Churchill let the arrow fly. The man dropped without a sound, the shaft buried in his chest. It was the first confirmed longbow kill in a European war since the 17th century, and the last in World War II. The British Army did not know how to classify an officer who fought with longbow, broadsword, and bagpipes, but Churchill did not care. He had served in Burma, quit the army in 1936 to work abroad, then rejoined in 1939, bringing his medieval kit with him. Tactically, the longbow or sword was no match for modern firepower at range. Psychologically, they were priceless. Churchill understood that terror, surprise, and spectacle in close combat could break an enemy faster than bullets alone. A bagpipe wail and a charging broadsword froze men trained for rifles. A silent arrow could kill before a shot was heard. After Dunkirk, where 338,000 men were evacuated between May 26 and June 4, 1940, Churchill returned to Britain with his bow, sword, and pipes. He soon volunteered for the new commandos, small, brutal units formed to raid occupied Europe. The training was savage. Volunteers marched and fought until only the toughest remained. Churchill excelled. Older than most, stronger and relentless, he offered something none of the others did. Theater turned into weaponry. In late 1941, No. 3 Commando prepared a major raid on a Norwegian island that guarded vital fjords and factories producing materials for explosives. Churchill asked permission to lead the first wave and to land with his bagpipes and broadsword. Permission was grudgingly granted. On December 27, 1941, as landing craft hit the rocky shore and naval guns hammered the batteries, Churchill stepped into the surf, played the March of the Cameron Men, then threw a grenade, drew his sword, and charged. The sight of a man calmly piping under fire, and then charging with a broadsword shattered German cohesion. Moy Island fell within minutes. The wider operation captured prisoners, destroyed installations, and tied down thousands of German troops across Norway. That raid made Churchill legend. Newspapers cheered the officer who played pipes in the battle. Commanders who'd once doubted him now sought him out. By 1943, he commanded No. 2 Commando and took that reputation to Sicily and Italy. He landed in Operation Husky in July 1943, bagpipes, broadsword, and longbow still with him, and led fierce small unit actions through mountain villages and fortified positions. In September, at the Salerno beachhead, his commandos held a key junction against repeated counterattacks. When observation posts on the high ground directed deadly artillery fire, Churchill chose stealth over a frontal assault. He and a single corporal slipped through the dark, surprised the defenders, and by dawn had captured 42 Germans and a mortar crew. He earned the Distinguished Service Order. Unmentioned was that he'd done much of it sword in hand. Churchill's tactics were simple. Use audacity, surprise, and brutality in small units to do strategic damage. A daring raid could force the enemy to divert tens of thousands of troops to garrison duty. Hitler responded to the Norwegian raids by beefing up coastal defenses. Men who might have fought elsewhere were tied down answering a new, unexpected threat. By 1944, Churchill and his commandos were operating in the Adriatic, supporting Yugoslav partisans. The terrain was brutal, the enemy hardened, but the myth of the madman with a sword already traveled ahead of him. Partisans admired his fearlessness. Germans feared and sometimes refused to believe the stories. Through raids on outposts, sabotage of supply lines, and close fighting in mountain passes, Churchill and his men kept pressure on German positions and helped free ground for partisan operations. Across campaigns from France to Norway, Sicily to Italy, and into the Balkans, Jack Churchill used an odd arsenal: longbow, broadsword, and bagpipes. Not because he thought modern weapons were irrelevant, but because he understood how violence and spectacle could unbalance an opponent. He turned eccentricity into an instrument of war, a psychological edge that multiplied the tactical punch of small, elite units. He survived where many would not. He came out of battles bloody but unbowed, his instruments intact and his legend intact. For the Germans who encountered him, surrendering to man with a sword often seemed the sanest option. For British morale, his raid showed that an island's defeat in May 1940 did not mean the end of British will to fight. Jack Churchill's story is less about medieval weapons defeating modern ones than about an officer who weaponized audacity, and whose battlefield theater changed how men fought and what commanders refused to ignore. In May 1944, Churchill was ordered to seize the German-held island of BR, which dominated Dalmatian shipping lanes. His mixed force, 43 men from No. 43 Commando, a troop from No. 40 Commando, and about 1,500 Yugoslav partisans. The commandos were well trained. The partisans were brave but poorly equipped and loosely disciplined. Coordinating them for a complex amphibious assault would be hard. The landing on BR on the night of May 2nd, 1944, was unopposed. The Germans had withdrawn from the beaches into prepared hill defenses. The plan called for an immediate partisan advance. Instead, the partisan leaders hesitated until morning. Churchill seethed. The loss of prize gave the enemy time to dig in and call for reinforcements. At dawn, No. 43 Commando made a flanking move, while Churchill led No. 40 Commando in a frontal assault. The partisans stayed at the beach. Machine gun and mortar fire cut into the attackers. Churchill kept pushing forward, bagpipes playing, urging his men up the slope. The attack stalled. Ammunition ran low. A German mortar salvo struck the group, clustered around Churchill, killing or wounding everyone except him. He survived because he had been standing slightly apart, still playing, alone on a hillside, surrounded by dead and wounded, with Germans closing and no means of escape. Churchill sat on a rock and played the Scottish lament, "Will ye no come back again?" The sight confused the approaching Germans. They held their fire for a moment. A grenade detonated nearby, and Churchill lost consciousness. When he awoke, he was a prisoner, believed by his captors to be connected to Winston Churchill. He was flown to Berlin for interrogation. Finding no strategic value, the Germans sent him to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where prominent prisoners and hostages were held. Conditions were brutal. Most inmates never left alive. Churchill refused to be broken. He studied the camp, mapped guard rotations, and recruited allies. With spoons, hands, and scraps of metal, they dug a tunnel from a garden drainage ditch, hiding spoil under compost. The tunnel ran about 110 meters under the fence and emerged in woods beyond the perimeter. On September 23, 1944, Churchill and 4 other British officers crawled through the tunnel and scattered into Germany. Churchill paired with squadron leader Bertram James. They aimed for the Baltic coast and Sweden, walking at night, stealing food, avoiding towns. After 2 weeks, they reached within a few kilometers of the shore before a German patrol arrested them near Rostock. Recaptured, Churchill was moved to a camp in the Austrian Alps. He spent the winter of 1944 to 45 as a prisoner while Germany collapsed. In late April 1945, about 140 prominent prisoners were marched to northern Italy as possible hostages. A tense standoff between Wehrmacht and SS troops ended with the SS withdrawing. The prisoners were left in a small village. Many waited for Allied forces. Churchill did not. He walked south across mountain passes, injured and starving, and after 8 days reached Verona, where an American reconnaissance unit accepted his identity and sent him back to Britain through military channels. Churchill returned home in May 1945 as the European War ended. He immediately requested transfer to the Far East to fight Japan. While en route, he learned of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki, August 9th. Japan surrendered on August 15th. Churchill was disappointed. He had prepared for another campaign and a final chance to fight. Post-war, the army did not quite fit him. Decorated and restless, he sought active duty. By 1947, he was second in command of the 1st Battalion Highland Light Infantry in Palestine as violence escalated between Jewish and Arab forces ahead of the British withdrawal. After the Dasa Convoy massacre on April 13, 1948, Churchill organized and oversaw the evacuation of trapped medical staff and patients from Mount Scopus, ensuring the safe passage of hundreds. He continued to chase danger and odd pursuits. On July 21, 1955, at 48, Churchill rode the tidal bore of the River Severn on a homemade board, one of Britain's earliest surfers. He retired from the Army in 1959 as a lieutenant colonel after more than 30 years' service. Retirement suited his eccentric streak, building radio-controlled model warships, restoring steamboats, playing bagpipes at regimental events, and small stunts like tossing his briefcase onto the tracks so it landed in his garden. He spoke of his wartime deeds without boast, honest about what he had done. Jack Churchill died on March 8, 1996, aged 89. He was not the greatest strategist, but he embodied one thing: individual courage. A soldier who fought with a sword and played bagpipes under fire, escaped a concentration camp, walked hundreds of kilometers to safety, and kept seeking challenges when peace arrived. His legacy lives on in the commandos and special forces that followed, and in anyone who refuses to accept that something is impossible.